Hello, this is Elif Gulmen and welcome to Puzzle the News podcast. Today I will be talking to Jordan Milner, who is from Durham. He is active with the Palestinian cause. Hi Jordan, how are you today?
Hiya, I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing well as well, thank you. Thank you for coming and joining this podcast today. And I would like to first ask you who you are, what do you do, and then from there dive into the questions.
No worries. So I am Jordan, as you mentioned. I'm from Durham. I work for a research group in the farming industry. And what was the last question? Sorry.
It was a general question, just to ask, and get to know who you are before we, ask further.
All right. Yeah. That's me in a nutshell, really. And then obviously try and support Palestinian liberation wherever I can around work.
So when do you start understanding and knowing where Palestine is and what the Palestinian history is? Was it something that started later on in your life, or was it something that you've known since you were young?
So I'm 30 now, and when I was about 21, I got involved with a communist group called the RCG, and they give us a political education, and that obviously included the Palestine question, which they've been very active on for decades now. But that was my introduction to Palestine, and obviously they give us a chronological history of how Israel came to be a state, and the history of Zionism and Britain's involvement and complicity in the establishment of Israel. And before that, I'd never heard of it really. I got involved with activism early on because I was quite passionate about like anti-racism, and saw a bit of it in school and stuff. And they were doing marches against like racist immigration bills and stuff like this, and that's how I got involved with them. And then obviously that gives us like a wider political education in terms of capitalism and how it's all linked to racism and sexism, and obviously like liberation struggles for like independence of countries, which is, there's many different countries that have liberated themselves through armed resistance or otherwise. And yeah, hopefully Palestine will be also liberated.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to ask, so it sounds like you've been very involved with raising awareness and advocating for Palestinian rights, before October the 7th. I'm not a big fan of using that phrase because what's been happening in Gaza and in Palestine's been happening way before October the 7th. But I just wanted to, before diving into the questions about what's currently present happening right now in Gaza, over the years since you were 21, what have you been able to do to raise awareness and advocate for not just Palestinian rights, I guess, but for human rights as a whole?
Well, I was only with the RCG for about 2 or 3 years, and then in terms of like actually organizing things in the streets and doing things, I wasn't that active after that time. I just participated in events and tried to raise awareness online through social media. But when we were organizing back then, we would do like targeted pickets of M&S, because M&S was very pro-Israeli, and the CEO at the time donated lots and lots of money directly to the Israeli regime. We would do targeted pickets of like banks that were like complicit as well, that were also funding Israel. And if things were happening at the time, like if there were skirmishes going on, or if Israel invaded, or God forbid massacres were happening or things like that, we would do pickets at the monument or something and try to raise awareness about what was going on, and we would link it to why it's going on in British capitalism, and the fact that Israel is kind of like imperialism's attack dog in the Middle East, and it serves their interest to have it there, you know, because they don't want independent Arab countries to exist. Essentially, they don't want like independent foreign policy. They don't want markets to be closed off to them. You know, they want everything to be open and unregulated, and they want like a smooth relationship so that imperialism can continue to plunder the region. And Israel's definitely facilitated that, among others. And I think that's why today you see so many Arab countries not really doing much for Palestine, you know, and just being completely spineless. You know, allowing America or other European countries to like use the airports to refuel, or, you know, giving them military assistance, military aid. So yeah, I don't know, I'm starting to go off a tangent now. So
it just comes to show like how over the years you've gained this knowledge to motivate you to keep on doing, you know, what you're doing. I guess with what's happening right now, the current climate, you know, with what's happening in Gaza, I met you through social media, and social media right now is a very powerful tool in communicating not just what you're having for breakfast, but just, you know, like in general, like everything, like what we're seeing in Gaza, we're able to see through these videos and pictures that are flooding through Instagram, Facebook, etc. Would you like to explain a bit about social media and how you use that to raise awareness about what's happening in Palestine, or just raising awareness about other matters that link to, you know, human rights?
Yeah, sure. I agree. I think social media is like a really important tool. And I think nowadays it's when a lot of people go for the news or for political discussion, you know, unless you're going to events and stuff, which, you know, a lot of people are just going to work, coming home, making tea, and then going to sleep, you know what I mean? And like the news or social media is like kind of like an online forum, if you like. And I think one of the most important things people can do online is to counter propaganda. You know, like there was an article the other day the BBC produced about some Israeli attack dogs who had been set loose on a young guy with Down syndrome in Palestine, and they killed him. And they released this title of this article, and it was like, you know, something like very neutral, like a man with Down syndrome dies in Palestine or something. Like there was no like I can't remember the exact title, but there was no direct blame laid on the IDF. And because of the backlash online, they actually changed the article more to give a more accurate depiction of what happened. And yeah, I think doing counter propaganda, not just to change what our bourgeois media is saying, but to create our own type of media, you know, and our own voice, for what is actually happening on the ground. Because you know, our media is completely biased, and we need a counter to that, because they are reaching everyone. They have a huge reach, and you know, we need to also reach people and give them education about what's going on. I'm not saying that education and awareness in of itself will necessarily lead to any sort of concrete action change. And I think that's got to be, I think the awareness raising has got to be coupled with organising and getting people involved in actually being part of movements and being part of active stuff on the streets, you know? Like we've got to bring people into the fold, and we've actually got to go out and do stuff, you know what I mean? Because you can have all the awareness and you can be right on everything, but it's not necessarily going to change anything, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Like just something as simple as like sharing a post, obviously, can be seen by someone who may know nothing about Palestine and then may lead them to question. And then from there, it could actually lead to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 people maybe come into these protests, to come into these demonstrations, whatever you want to call them, and taking part, participating in this Palestinian movement. From what I've just explained, how do you think, with you having the privilege in some sense to be from here and having the platforms to share what's happening around the world in Gaza, for instance, how do you think your posts are able to influence the people that you have around in your circle?
Hopefully in a positive way. I mean, it's hard to gauge what influence my posts are having to the circle around me. Obviously, I talk about with friends and family all the time, and some attitudes have shifted. I haven't got any family members that have came on protest, I can tell you that much. Be very like apolitical, but yeah, I think. I mean, I put up some reels that got quite a good reach. And it was Ansar Allah, a spokesman, who was countering some Sky News propaganda. So yeah, I don't know what my necessarily what my is doing.
General question, so it's not too personal, but what are your thoughts on like people losing their jobs for sharing posts on social media in support of Palestine? Or like, we hear like people who have family problems because of what's happening in Gaza. I guess someone who's like just, like me, like a normal person, like how does that affect you? Does it restrict you from wanting to speak up and educating people, or does that motivate you more, push you more to, speak up more about what's happening there, so people are not just relying on, like you said, BBC or Sky?
Yeah, I think people being sacked for the political views is absolutely awful, and it's technically it's illegal under trade union laws, from what I understand, because political views should be a protected characteristic. So if you are being discriminated against at work because of your political views, that is basis for an appeal process and of course, a legal action. But yeah, it's disgusting, and it's just censorship at the end of the day. Does it spur me on to do more? Yeah, it does. I've got no. I mean, I don't necessarily post where I work. I kind of avoid that. But there was some big right-wing Zionists who tried to come to Durham to do a debate on whether or not the Palestinian leadership is at fault for everything that's going on. I don't know if you were part of that, but the Durham encampment students had a protest against the debate, and they shut down the debate. And I was there, and afterwards, the guy was on Twitter like spouting off about like, oh, these guys, the terrorists, and all this type of stuff. And I replied to him like, well, why didn't you come out and face us then? And I called him a coward. And then next thing you know, he's wrote this like huge long blog post about like the events of the night, and he singled me out of everybody else. Bear in mind, I wasn't the only one who didn't cover my face. There was like loads of others, but he singled me out and did like a whole deep dive on my Twitter history, a whole deep dive on my age, my family. I think there was even a link to my LinkedIn. But it hasn't stopped me. It hasn't made me scared. Because that's what they want to happen. They want you to be scared. They want you to be silent. It's all just intimidation tactics. And that's exactly what Zionists are about. The bullies, you know what I mean? So no, it's nothing will ever stop me from talking about it, to be honest. Even if I did lose my job, and I've shared GoFundMe's or whatever when people need support if they have lost a job. Or, and I was going to say another useful thing about social media is all of the fundraising work that has gone on. It's such a shame that for a lot of people, the only way out is to actually leave Gaza, but we should be supporting that wherever we can. So, or like, if they need funding within Gaza, like I've shared GoFundMe's and different types of fundraisers, and I think that's a really useful thing that people can do online as well, and just give money, $5, $10, whatever you can give. Because it might not seem like a lot to us, or it might seem like a lot to us, but it's like even more to them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Gaza right now, like what's happening there, it has sparked not just a movement, but it's changed a lot of people in their perspectives of the world, I should say, in general. So in what way do you think what's been happening in Gaza has impacted the world? It's quite a broad question, but for you, how would you see the world's dynamic right now before October the 7th?
Well, I think, before October the 7th, most of the world had consistently voted in favour of Palestine for decades. It might not have been like the most biggest issue or most public issue at the time before October 7th, but the world has been talking in terms of countries and mass movements. It's been consistently behind the Palestine question, pro-Palestine question, and October 7th has only served to amplify that. I think it's completely became the cause of global humanity in a way, because everyone can see the horrors of what's going on. And, I think if you're a human, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who looks at the situation and thinks, oh yeah, this is great. You know what I mean? People don't like suffering generally, and people don't want suffering generally to be happening, because we're human, I think. And I think that will only sort of grow. I mean, we've seen that with the recent ICJ ruling, saying that the settlements in the 1967 occupied territories are illegal, which has been illegal on countless UN Security Council resolutions and countless UN resolutions, and there's usually only the United States and Israel that vote against these resolutions. So for decades and decades, this ICJ ruling, obviously the ICJ hasn't ruled in that way before, but I think it'll just only serve to put pressure on the Zionist state and isolate it diplomatically. And hopefully in Britain, we can bring sanctions against Israel and end arms contracts. I think they're probably the main two forms of complicity of our state, and I think that's our main responsibility, is to drive that forward and call for that. And I know for many, many months, which I got tired of hearing, the call was ceasefire now. And yeah, that's valid to an extent. And, Hamas and Israel have both had ceasefire proposals. Obviously, Israel's ceasefire proposals are completely unrealistic and usually always call for the complete dismantlement of Hamas, which is not going to happen. And they never want to find any middle ground with Hamas. They never want to completely withdraw troops. They never want to respect those types of ceasefire proposals. Where was I going with this?
I have a question. So,
sorry. This is what I was going to say. I was going to say So obviously the ceasefire now things, they were valid for a time, but the main slogan now, I think, should be sanctions now and end arms contracts now. And I think the Palestinian solidarity movement in Britain, generally speaking, obviously you've got a few different groups that are like leading that, unelectedly leading that, but I don't feel like those slogans have moved there necessarily yet. They're kind of going in the right direction, but we really need to like be challenging the British state, because ceasefire now is just not good enough anymore, and too much has went on, and it's been this way for months, obviously, as you know. But that's where we really need to get to. We need to actually concretely do something. I mean, I was part of Unite the Union for about 8 years, and I recently just cancelled my membership, because of the I don't know whether it was right or wrong. I think it was right, but because of their Palestine stance. I mean, the leader, Sharon Graham, is just completely hostile to anything pro-Palestinian, I feel like. Never shows up at any of the marches, never wants the union to be officially part of the marches. And there's lots of people in Unite doing some really good work trying to like push for Unite to do something on the arms contracts, because the Unite the Union, despite being one of the biggest British unions representing millions of workers and usually claiming that it's very progressive, represents arms trade workers. They represent the workers in BAE Systems who are making the jet components, who are making things like this. And they do. And when pro-Palestinian people in Unite the Union are trying to trying to get the workers to go on strike, or trying to educate the workers, or trying to get the union to push to end these contracts, or, trying to get the union to give workers the support in the union so that they don't have to build these weapons, it just falls on complete opposition from officers, from the top level, from even workers in the factories sometimes. And it's like a cat and mouse game. Like the workers who don't want to build the weapons will blame the union, and the union who doesn't want any action to happen will blame the workers and say, oh, well, we need the workers to lead. If they want to strike, then we'll help them. And then if the workers say, well, we want to strike, they won't help them. And it's like you spend like 5 months in a union that is like not democratic, and it's got so many different bureaucratic channels to try and go through and pass motions here and there, and it's just complete bullshit, you know what I mean? And I just got sick and tired of it. And it's like it feels like, so in some ways, it feels like a bit of a cop out, like leaving it, but I feel like it doesn't serve anything, you know what I mean? And I know there's still lots of people in there that are fighting to take the union in that direction, and I hope it happens, but I just can't be in a union any longer that literally supports and represents this very reactionary section of workers who are building weapons for Israel, So I hope with the call to end arms contracts, that aids the trade unions to end this type of work. And yeah, I think that would be a positive step.
I was because you mentioned it as well about the British government and British politics, and for us to see how Gaza is going to unfold in the future, it all lies in the British governmental MPs' hands, US as well. The two main countries that are very involved in having a say for a ceasefire or not, for instance. So from what you've just explained, how can people like yourself be able to bring a change to Gaza by protesting against these politicians? In what ways can be done? I mean, we've just had a general election. A lot of people went out and voted. Some people didn't vote in protest, and in result, Keir Starmer, he's the Prime Minister now. But in the long run, as someone like yourself, how can people like you, me, and everyone else be able to push the government to bring, a change in Gaza?
I think we've got to force the hand. Ultimately, I don't think that we can rely on lobbying and trying to change individual MPs' attitudes and things like this. I think we've actually got to force the hand. I think we need to do more radical action. We need to actually do something more radical than just marching on the streets from one point in London to the next point in London, hearing some like liberal speeches and then all going home. We need to actually like go to Parliament and shut Parliament down or something. Like we need to go further, I think. I think we just need to go further, and that's why I'm really frustrated with the leaders of the Palestine solidarity movement in Britain, because it's not going far enough and it's too respectable, it's too liberal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only way you can force change. And at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as the mass movement of Palestine solidarity people in Britain to make that change. MPs don't have to make the change. You look through history, it's been normal working people that have made all the change. You know what I mean? It hasn't been liberal representatives of us. You know what I mean? You think about like the right to get the vote and all this type of thing. That was like normal working class people who were out there. And some of it did get really radical. Some buildings got smashed up and all this type of stuff. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but like we've got this like sanitized view of like protesting, you know what I mean? And do you really think that people like David Lammy are going to listen? He was like shaking Netanyahu's hand the other day. You know what I mean? Like you can't get through to these people. You've got to force the hand. I feel like that's where the mass movement has got to get to. But in order to get there, we need to build a movement that's got that mass capability, got that democratic capability, actually do those types of actions. You know what I mean? And right now it doesn't. So yeah, I think it's got to be a lot more radical. The actions have got to go further. They should have intensified by now. But they've been prevented from intensifying, I think.
Protests that were intended to be peaceful, as peaceful as possible, but especially over the past months, when things have got really bad, really escalated to a point where people's frustration has hit a red line. We have seen, like, especially these encampments, on these university campuses, like students being pulled by university security or police coming in, and students being attacked and stuff. When we've been hearing these sort of things happening, it has built a rage amongst a lot of people who are advocating for Palestinian rights. But if when you say we need to become more radicalized, there would be a lot of people who would protest against that, even within the people who get involved with the Palestinian cause. What do you think about taking that route? If so, like if let's say a group of people all gathered and try to storm into Parliament, in what way would that help the people in Gaza, do you think?
Well, obviously not necessarily. Like, some acts are going to be symbolic, right? We could say that the marches are symbolic. What has that done to help Gaza? You know what I mean? That's done nothing to help Gaza. Us marching, it's built our movement in Britain. It's been important in terms of raising awareness and drawing more people into the movement. And I'm not saying all marches are bad. Marches are good. But we need to do more targeted actions, I think. And we need to do things that are going to put more pressure on our government. I think if the main strategy in the PSC boardrooms is mass marches as a way to sway the opinions of our MPs, it's been, what was it, like 10 months now? That hasn't worked. That hasn't worked. So let's switch strategy and try something different. You know what I mean? So yeah, marches, storming Parliament, it might not directly help the people in Gaza, but if we could pressure the government that much that they will put sanctions on Israel or end arms contracts, I think that's probably the next one that's going to happen, is ending the arms contracts, then that will help the people of Gaza. You know what I mean? But it's got to take a mass movement that's able to put that pressure on the government. And how do you pressure a government? How do you pressure a government? Do you just like, the marches haven't been pressuring enough, I don't think. And with Starmer coming in, obviously, they say like the other day they've restored the funding to UNRWA. Great, restore the funding to UNRWA. I think that's great. But to do that at the same time as selling arms to Israel and funding Israel, the Israeli regime, is just disgusting. You know what I mean? So you're giving with one hand and you're killing with the other. How does that make any sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to refund UNRWA, and we need sanctions, and we need to end the arms contracts more, I would say. You know what I mean? And it's despicable of Labour to try and claim this as a pro-Palestinian victory, and to say, oh, look, we're much better than the Tories. Because for 9 months prior, they've been completely complicit in the genocide against Palestine. So it's complete disgusting political football. And yeah.
I think overall, we've covered a lot of very important topics, and I think I would like to just end with asking, do you see a free Palestine? Do you see Gaza and what's happening there right now coming to an end? And do you see a light of hope pretty much in the future for Palestine?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I just want to preface this by saying I just get a bit worked up when I'm talking about it. It's not directed at you. This just like all this stuff really pisses us off. Sorry if you have to bleep that out. So yeah, I do see a free Palestine. I think that it took many, many, many decades to end apartheid in South Africa, but I think ultimately the solution will be reached. Obviously, that's for the Palestinians to decide what exactly that looks like. But yeah, I think a free Palestine will come. I believe in a free Palestine. If I didn't, then I don't think I'd be as passionate or part of this movement. And I think it's imperative that free Palestine comes about so that they can enjoy freedom and they can govern their own lives how they want to govern their own lives in their land. You know what I mean?
And if there is a free Palestine, that means there's also a new world. Because the world, if there is a free Palestine, the world probably by that point has changed. So maybe like that is the strive and the fight for people like yourselves, in reaching that point to see a different world dynamic. But to get to that point, like you said, comes with a lot of work, and obviously there's different opinions amongst yourselves. But yeah, it was really interesting to talk to you today. And would you like to add anything else?
Free Palestine.